Watch with me the 10 most prominent female spies in history, as each of these spies provided a great service to its intelligence and played an active role in the events of the current world. Number 1. Anna Chapman, a Russian businesswoman, born in 1982, arrived in Britain in 2003, and headed a real estate company in 2006. She married Britain and divorced him after a while, and Chapman moved to the United States of America in 2010, where she opened an unofficial website for renting homes. And at that time she met a person named Rahman, works as a double intelligence agent, and he recruited her to work with them, and she was delivering fake passports to illegal Russian immigrants. Chapman arrived in Russia on July 8 as part of a spy exchange deal, the largest of its kind since the end of the Cold War. Number 2. Christine Keeler, born in 1943, is a former British model who was recruited by Soviet intelligence, and she used her beauty to lure senior politicians and obtain information from them. In the 60s of the last century, Keeler sparked a major political scandal in Britain when she made contact with the British Defence Minister, Profumo, and the military attaché. The Soviet Union, Ivanov, during their visits to a nightclub where she was working, and it became clear that Keeler was hunting for the secrets of the British Minister of Defence to sell them to the Soviet diplomat. Number 3. Lise de Bessec, after fleeing Paris in 1940, found herself in London, where she volunteered to work with the Special Operations Unit, being one of the first women to be dropped in France in a rubber band parachute, and de Bessec disguised herself after arriving as a poor widow and began working on her mission to form a network of the French resistance, as well as transferring weapons from the United Kingdom to members of the resistance. But de Bessec was not satisfied with that, as she took the title of an amateur archaeologist to gather the geographical information required for the landings carried out by the English. De Bessec excelled in all her tasks without ever being revealed by the Germans, and after the end of the war she lived her life in a perfect way. Normal until she died at the age of 98 in 2004. Number 4. Ethel Rosenberg is an American, and she and her husband Julius were able to leak news and designs for a nuclear bomb to the Soviet Union. The officer in the American Army, and they were arrested in 1950 and accused of spying for the Soviet Union, and they were sentenced to death, and the sentence was carried out in 1953. Number 5. Violette René, a young French woman who married a French officer out of love and gave birth to a child from him to start World War II, and her family moved to England. Her husband was killed by the Nazis while on duty. René, after her husband was killed, engaged in secret work with British intelligence to avenge her husband, where the British intelligence put René inside France to work with the French resistance in the bombings of German roads and railways, and also worked to identify and monitor important targets for British intelligence to be detonated by them. And René took over the task of organizing and reuniting the scattered French resistance in Normandy. And her car was monitored by the Gestapo forces. They exchanged fire, and she was arrested along with 2 other agents and 37 men. René's trial and execution on January 25, 1945. Number 6. Nancy Wake was born in 1912 in New Zealand, grew up in Australia, and met French industrialist Henri Edmond in 1939, and married him to live in France. But World War II and Germany's invasion of France did not give them enough time to enjoy their lives, and Wake joined the French resistance and became the director of Machias groups, which a guerrilla war is waged on German officers, especially members of the German secret police Gestapo, and the Gestapo called her the White Rat, and by 1943 Wake was the person most wanted by the German intelligence service, and a bounty for bringing her alive or dead was 5 million francs. But this did not terrorize Wake, who fought during the war 7,000 confrontations with the resistance groups, clashed with approximately 22,000 German soldiers, of whom about 1,400 people died, while the resistance lost only 100 people under her hands. Her husband was arrested, and Gestapo tried to interrogate him to find out where Wake. But he refused to disclose her whereabouts and died during torture. After the end of the war, she was honored by England, France and the United States of America, and she worked for a while in the intelligence division of the British Air Force. But in 1957 she remarried and returned to Australia to continue a quiet life there. Number 7. Mata Hari. It is not possible to talk about a woman as a spy without mentioning Mata Hari, the most famous of all female spies, and Hari worked for the Germans during the First World War. Hari was a famous Dutch dancer and formed a large network of relations with political men in France and England, and was able to transmit information to the Germans. However, the French intelligence was able to intercept an encrypted message coming to the beautiful spy through a code that the French were able to detect, which led to her arrest. The French tried to recruit her, but could not trust her, and Hari was tried for espionage on September 15, 1917. At the age of 41, found guilty and shot. Number 8. Noor Inayat. On September 13, 1944, the beautiful Indian girl Noor, descendant of a family that had previously ruled India, fell dead after she was brutally tortured by the Nazis in the Dachau concentration camp, and ended up being executed by a bullet to the head. Noor worked with British intelligence against the Nazi regime in France during its occupation, where she formed a spy network, and is considered the first spy to send her information via radio waves in history. Noor was betrayed, which led to her arrest, but she withstood all interrogation and torture attempts, and the German secret police Gestapo did not even know her real name, and when she came at the moment of her execution, Noor chanted freedom before she was killed, and a bust of Noor was placed in Gordon, London in 2012, to be the first statue of an Asian Muslim woman to be placed in a public square in England. Number 9. Isabella Boyd. Best known as a spy in the American Civil War in the 1860s, where she worked with the Southern Army against the Northerners. Boyd was transmitting valuable information about the movements of the Southerners, and she was able to obtain the information easily because she worked in a small hotel owned by her father, and Boyd was arrested in 1862 at the age of 18. Number 10. Margaret Camille, the wife of General Thomas Gage, who commanded the British Army during the British-American War, and she is an American born in 1734 in the state of New Jersey, but remained loyal to her state, and therefore Margaret sent information about her husband's plans to raid Lexington and Concord to the Americans. The leak of information was revealed. Her husband couldn't prove it, so he sent her to England to get away from the battlefield on her husband's orders in the summer of 1775.